Modern day finance leaders face more uncharted pressures and possibilities than those that came before them. What are the emerging trends and how are they preparing to embrace them? How do spend data factors play into their decision making? And what tools and procedures are they implementing to increase efficiency of their program? My name is Theodora. I'm the founder of Unconventional Ventures and the host of today. And I'm super delighted to welcome to our session two forward thinkers, finance leaders, Sinead Fitzmaurice, CEO of TransferMate and the first female CEO of Irish Unicorn, and Landon Roe, CFO at GoGlass. Now let's give everyone a minute to introduce themselves. Sinead, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Theo. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to join the panel today. And firstly, thank you for SAP Concur for inviting me to join. My name, as Theo said, is Sinead Fitzmaurice. I'm the CEO of TransferMate Global Payments. TransferMate is one of the widest regulated payment infrastructure platforms in the world. Prior to taking up the CEO role, I was actually the CFO. And prior to that, I spent 10 years with PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I suppose the modern CFO topic is quite close to my chest, considering I came from that background and migrated to the CEO. So delighted to kind of share my experiences with Landon and Theo today.
Thank you so much, Sinead. And Landon?
Hey, everybody. I want to thank SAP Concur for this opportunity to speak. My name is Landon Roe. I am the Chief Financial Officer for GoGlass. Prior to being the CFO here, I led the accounting department for a property management company where I had about 32 employees. I am so excited to be at GoGlass and look at the spend management, look at process improvement, and be that modern day CFO that the CEO needs.
Thank you so much. Now, to start off, let's hear from both of you something about your current corporate goals, because as we all know, this is getting to the time of the year. So let's start with you, Landon. What goals are you currently focused on? And more curiously, how has spend management prompted you to get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, our corporate goals going into the end of 2023 is to look at spend. Are we spending the money to drive the business success? We don't want to just spend money to spend money. And so over the last 3 weeks, I've been in the process of implementing SAP Concur for our company credit card. And I'm confident that's giving us the visibility into what's being purchased on the P card. And we can make better decisions based off that data. But it's really with how can we do more with less? How can we drive the operational expenses down? And what we're really looking into what our return on investment is with the expenses that we're implementing inside of our business.
So you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned something about the credit card spend. You mentioned data, and you mentioned optimizing the cost basis. So I wanted to do a quick follow-up on that. What kind of actions have you been able to drive based on what you have found so far?
Yeah, so I was in the company for about 2 weeks and I started digging through our credit card spend and I noticed a couple charges that I questioned. The biggest offender is subscriptions, right? You sign up for something on your company credit card and it just bills month over month over month. And you kind of lose visibility to that, especially when it's buried in an Excel spreadsheet that has nobody reviewing and approving. So I'm digging and I'm finding subscriptions that haven't been used in 2+ years that we were able to cancel and recoup some of those dollars back. So that was in Excel spreadsheets. Now with SAP Concur and that implementation, I'm going to have better insight with the controls that SAP Concur can handle. I can have receipts housed electronically. Our operations team, who's always on the go, our sales team, they can download it on their phone and that can give them so much more flexibility so you don't hear the time old tale of I lost my receipt or I don't have time to do my expense report.
I had to chuckle because when you were talking about the functions that you were talking about, I felt like I need some of that personally. Managing subscription, getting a better handle on what I've been doing, that's important. So let's go to you, Sinead. Quick question. Over the past few years, from your perspective, what challenges has your organization been tackling?
Yeah, and it's interesting listening to Landon. A lot of, the challenges resonate with me. Like, I suppose the first number of years, TransferMate was building its regulation platform, then going into commercialization of the asset. And as we were doing that, we were scaling out the staff right across the globe. So if you think of being regulated in 91 territories, with that comes local commercial teams in each location. And when I was chuckling to myself, as you were, Theo, when Landon was talking about the expense claims, and I don't have time to fill those out. But when you've got, a business that is internationalizing with pots of staff around the world, SAP Concur as a software is very important in terms of the transparency of the heartbeat of what these people are doing, marrying that to the performance management of the global workforce as well. And not only the expense management side, but SAP Concur Invoice in terms of the accounts payable and the accounts receivable. And we'll come to that more in the session in terms of the broader technology and access to real-time data. So in terms of ourselves, the digital strategy is set from the board, and it needs to be top down. So your board strategy is essentially where the organization wants to get to in 5 years. So that is management of people and the software around that, but also management of the key drivers of the business, be it your suppliers, your accounts receivable, what they owe you, and effective management of the working capital. And I love the references that Landon made to basic but robust spend management, and we're very much in that era where you utilize your digital agenda to achieve results on the profitability line. I think that's very important.
It's a means to an end, if you will. But when you're talking about 91 locations all across the world in a highly regulated industry, my goodness, an image came to my mind is the Swiss Army knife. There are so many things and so many moving parts and pieces. And we like to talk about the current time as a time of unpredictability. So much things can happen. How do you cope with that? And because, from your perspective, it's the rate of change, right? That is unprecedented. I feel like we overuse that word a little bit. But, the role of CFO through the years has changed as well.
Mm-hmm. And like you hit the nail on the head in terms of if you look back at the last 3 years, CFOs have been faced with unpredictability, everything landing on their desk, and how do you react to it? And picking up on what Landon said, spreadsheets are not the way because they're reactive, not proactive. You've got to utilize your digital agenda to ensure that you have access to real-time data, because in that era of unpredictability, you need a dynamic CFO that is able to, I suppose, change up or change down in terms of the key drivers of the business. Landon mentioned interaction with the commercial department and all of the other departments. And I think, coming from the CFO background to the CEO background, I utilize my CFO to be the bedrock of the interaction with the other departments. If you are not utilizing technology, and when we say technology, it must be relevant to your department and to your industry and to your company. So there's a lot of technologies out there that can do X, Y, Z, but unless they're relevant to your business and your goals. So when we talk about the board strategy, that digital adoption and technology that you adopt needs to be core to how you're going to achieve your goals in the next 5 years. I kind of utilize the term to my CFO and my executive leadership team, always like they need to have the ability to look around corners. And with that, you need to utilize real-time data. So that's not only your accounts payable, your accounts receivable, but your management of staff, your management of expenses, as we described, needs to be, I suppose, educated to people that it's not a burden. It's empowering the company to achieve their goals over the next 5 years. And that comes with communication on all fronts in terms of the corporate strategy and the corporate goals. So very much, I suppose, yes, we're in an unpredictable world, but if you adopt various technologies to alleviate wastage within the system, which is core to the CFO, that's what they should be doing, but also leaning into the other departments to allow them to drive on and achieve the corporate goals is extremely important.
I found myself nodding as you were talking, because one of the pushback that we often hear is, I'm already so busy. We're already having so many things going on our plate. We don't have time to do this, right? Let's just keep doing what we have always been doing and it should be fine. Or on the other side of the spectrum, we'll have people that just dive head into anything that shines because it's attractive and sexy. How do you balance the tech needs, what your team needs, what your company needs, versus what is available? I mean, I know it's a huge question, but how do we even do that? Like, what kind of technology and mindset, if you will, that you'll need to support what you're doing?
It's a very, very vast question. I think, the analogy of Santa in the morning and opening the shiny new toys versus, again, I come back to the word relevance, and marrying that to the board strategy. And the board strategy is what the CEO should be essentially progressing through the organization. It comes down to me, it comes down to communication with all members of staff. And you will have the pushback where, I'm too busy. Well, let's unpack that. Why are you too busy? And sometimes people say, well, are you questioning what I'm doing day to day? Or no, I want to help. Tell me what's soaking your time so we can utilize technology to alleviate that. And then kind of give them the vision of the next 5 years. What's the vision of the organization? What's the mission statement of the organization? And once they understand that and you bring them on the journey, I'm not saying that it's easy, and I'm not saying it's like in game over, but they get that foresight and they know that you're not kind of pushing technology, that you're saying, okay, look at the transactions that you're dealing with today. So let's describe a situation where that grows fivefold in 6, 9 months, 12 months. How will you cope with that? Well, here's a way of doing that. And then you bring them on the journey, and then the shiny new toys in terms of the tech side. And you have to keep your staff focused. And the way to do that is keep them communicated on what the organization's goals are. I think there's no easy kind of wave your magic wand. You need to communicate. Culture is very important. Relevance of the technology that they utilize always needs to come back to, the organizational goals. And Landon mentioned the word return on investment, which to me is everything that a CFO should be looking at, and comes back to those two questions that you asked. What is the return on investment linked to the organization's strategic goals? And I think that's core. Like when you unpack all the buzzwords around it, it comes back to robust and basic principles around the financial management.
Isn't that always the case? Always go back to the basics. It doesn't matter what it is that outside that's distracting us. So Landon, this question is for you too, because you had mentioned when you first started in Go Glass, was it like fairly early on in the game that you realized, wait a minute, there's something else that we need to do, that we can do better? Well, what kind of reaction did you get? I'm very curious to hear from you when you came up with that observation.
Yeah, it's interesting because You have some people who embrace change with an open heart and others who resist it and push back. But I've always found myself to be successful in implementing change by putting it in the employee's mindset of, hey, you're key in a lot of data entry, things that I really want you to be focused on more analytical, or I think you're incredibly smart and can grow in your position in other ways versus doing something manual. So you always have to turn it around to make it about the employee, right? Because in today's world, when you start talking about automation, what's the first thing an employee thinks of? How long am I going to have my job? And we've got to get away from that mindset of what's going to happen with my job and more about how can we utilize their skills. Maybe the person's very good at reviewing a report and thinking about it analytically, but right now they're just building the report, going through the motions of doing it without any automation. So I was very, very fortunate to have a CEO. I was with the company for 2 weeks and I noticed where we were weak at as we were positioning ourselves for future growth. And I went to him and I said, hey, look, we have X, Y, and Z that we need to get automated. What is your feedback on this? Do you approve the expenditure? He was on board immediately because he understands the need for change. But the biggest driver of success of implementing technology, implementing automation, is to what Sinead said, communication is gonna be key, and sharing that company goal of, hey, today we're gonna brace ourselves for this automation or this technology so that we can be 5 times bigger in 10 years or 5 years or whatever that time frame is.
I love how you were approaching it. Put the employees, put the people in the center of it. Now, this has been quite a few years, but one of my first jobs, dating myself now, 20 something, almost 30 years ago, was working with a spectrophotometer company where we put inline solutions at glass manufacturing facilities and paper manufacturing facilities. And that was precisely what we're trying to say is if you can automate color measurement inline, you don't have to stop the line to take measurement. You ensure quality and you can help process things a little better. So you can actually do something else rather than the very manual task. And that was exactly what you're talking about, except obviously yours is way more fun doing spend management. So culture, communication. Those are the two key words.
If you're driving a good culture, it's important to communicate. Communication, culture. I think that those two C words go hand in hand.
I love it. Sinead, what about you? From your perspective, upskilling, reskilling, these are all things that we have always talked about in financial services and beyond. What are some of the key things from your perspective that we need to think about when it comes to workforce development?
I think it's marrying, when we talk about communication and the organizational goals, it's also bringing the staff on the journey of career progression. So when we talk about, look, in 5 years' time, and as we've been describing, 5 times activity, 10 times activity, they need to know, okay, what does that mean for them, not just in terms of making life easier, which is good in an unpredictable environment, but also how do they progress throughout the organization as you do that. And that comes to kind of all-encompassing performance management. We go back to the goals of the board and the strategy of the board. Performance management is very important, but career progression as well. And that communication needs to be married with that. So when you say to somebody, we're going to embrace technology, you're not going to be doing quite mundane tasks. And Landon mentioned, the reports. They need to understand how the reports are utilized within the organization. How do the management utilize that management information to drive the business forward? Getting it outside of, the traditional, I suppose, the CFO role was get the trial balance out on a monthly basis and, just be historic. But I think the CFO role is anything but today. It's more, as you say, very unpredictable kind of economic winds that are challenging the CFO role more and more and more. And I suppose if you can be dynamic and take yourself out of the historic to drive the business forward, that's very important. But bringing your staff, I suppose, together on the journey with the communication, but also the career progression. So you say, okay, tomorrow, the next day, this is the project roadmap. You're not going to be doing what you're doing today in 6 months, because the organization needs to scale and it needs to internationalize, because despite the unpredictability, globalization is still quite a force. It's still international, and despite the kind of squeeze on the supply chain, and I mentioned SAP Invoice in terms of the approvals and having that real-time access to data and interaction with your suppliers. And what we do with SAP, we're not only a customer, we're a partner, but we embed our payment infrastructure into the last mile of the transactions, so you can see the money movement within your working capital environment right up to your ERP system. But going back to the staff question and the communication, it's all about, well, what does that mean to me? And with myself, what I try to demonstrate is, throughout the organization in TransferMate and the wider group, we've demonstrated promotions from junior roles right up to senior roles. I myself started as a accountant within one of the sister companies of the group, went on to kind of form TransferMate, was the CFO there, instrumental in the infrastructure. But at all stages, you're demonstrating promotion. And like, we have multiple examples of that where you can point, and I think that's very important, kind of resonating it back to basics, not only with the CFO role, but also the staff culture, to say, well, we've demonstrated that we promote you, this is your career progression, and upskilling is very important within that. You mentioned upskilling at the start of the question. So, it's a very complex topic, but I think when you strip it back, it comes down to basic kind of, how do you bring people on a journey, and be that a service company or be it a manufacturing company, again, the centralized topic remains the same.
I like how you phrase it, and I can literally visualize a pathway where people are. And as humans, we like to know where we're going to be, right? Are we going to be in the same place, or if it's going to be somewhere else, what is that somewhere else? So this helps to paint a picture for them, if you will. So it helps to bring them on board the journey. Now, I'm going to ask you both to put a future hat on. And don't worry, I won't come back and ask you, hey, was this correct or no? But looking into the next year, what considerations do you have to make sure that your organization is going to be prepared for the future? I know this is a huge question to ask. And again, understanding in the background, there's a lot of things that could be outside of control, but curious to learn from both of you. What do you have in mind? Landon, would you like to start first?
Sure. I think one of our 2024 goals is to be more proactive versus reactive. And we talked about that earlier. You really can't, Sinead said, you can't be proactive in spreadsheets as you can using the technology. And she hit the nail on the head. You truly can't. We need to build dashboards that are meaningful, that can provide us insight into our business. And I think, so being more proactive and having that access to real-time data by building these dashboards.
You need a crystal ball.
Yeah. Okay. If I could get one, I would get one.
Well, totally embed that in the spreadsheet and then lump it into the SAP system, and voila, you have a wizard. So Sinead, what about you?
That's the $100 question. So I think for us, when I go back to the origins of TransferMate, we were born out of, I suppose, solving a problem for our customers. We could see that, the SWIFT system, the international cross-border system, was essentially quite an old system where payments went missing, they weren't embedded, and so on. And today that DNA runs through TransferMate. So now we're building out the fast forward all the infrastructure build, and SAP Concur would be aware of, I suppose, the embedded payments and, the dashboard and all of that MI that we bring to the table as part of the payments. But for me, it's really building out that product suite more so that the optionality of alternative payments for our customers are there. So as we go through that journey of larger customers and Fortune 500 customers and so on, that you have the ability to provide them IBANs and stored value and so on. So it's really for TransferMate, it's about being the market leader in terms of embedded payments. And like when I cast my memory back to probably 2015 and so on, embedded payments and the adoption of that was kind of a concept. Like today, it's still untouched. Like 95+% of transactions are still conducted through the correspondent banking network. So we're on a mission to, I suppose, be the market leaders within that space. And that's kind of what we're doing and bringing our staff on the journey. And it's really, really exciting for them. They're working on cutting edge innovative payment products that are powering banks. So we power banks as well as software companies and so on. But, if you had to ask me what's my challenge six years ago versus today, I want, extreme high performance talent based around my staff pool. And that comes with, again, marrying that back to the board agenda. And what we've been speaking about all along is bringing the people on the journey so that they know that they're working on something very, very good, which is solving a problem for people. And I think, as part of a product like SAP Concur, expense management solves a problem for staff that are international, and the transparency, and Landon spoke about that in terms of the return on investment. And considering, I suppose, the economic environment that we sit in today, profitability is now more relevant than it ever was, I think, in the last 5 years. And I think technology that can produce savings and demonstrate transparency and real-time access to data is extremely important for a dynamic CFO. And, I can testament to being a customer of SAP Concur that we utilize the expense management and the invoice. And I know we're partners and we embed the payments, but it's always utilizing that innovative technology to really go back to basics and cut out the wastage, increase the profitability, and that's what we're all about. So
I like that. Back to the basics, what's important and what problem you're trying to solve. Those are golden advice, if you will, regardless of time. What time we are in is timeless. I want to conclude this session with one question for both of you. If you were to give one piece of advice for fellow finance leaders, what would that be? What would you tell them? Landon?
I would say use the data. So implement the processes, the technology, but use the data that it gives you to make better informed decisions.
I like that. Use the data. Sinead?
I'd say the same, and I'd say get out of your comfort zone and talk to every single department. The CFO is the bedrock to execute the board strategy via the CEO, and you're an extremely important C-suite, and that means you are the core to interaction with all of the departments to achieve the goals. And the more outside of the numbers you can get, but understand the drivers, as Landon said, in terms of the data to power on, but at all times come back to what are the goals, actual variance, and so on.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sinead and Landon, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And last but not least, thank you, SAP Concur, for the opportunity for bringing us together. Hope you enjoyed the session.
Thanks, everyone.